I miss them, you can get
And I'm going to leave us unmuted. So if you do have any background noise, just go ahead and mute your microphone. That way it'll keep it. And then you can unmute at the end if you have some questions. But I was talking when we were getting started about my background. I've been in the fitness industry now for 50 years this December. And as I've gathered data relating to, the wellness industry I've been in, the exercise part of it, the nutrition part of it, as you get into nutrition, you gather data about, deficiencies in diets, things relating to weight loss. I got into environmental wellness in the mid 90s to really solve one of my own problems. And that's I've had respiratory issues my whole life. I've always been looking for a solution. And I discovered environmental wellness, air and water. And there's data and statistics that are built around all those. And many of you, George and Wayne and myself, we've been involved in this industry together now. It's hard to believe, George, Wayne and I, we go back almost 30 years. And
Yep.
and I don't want to honk my own horn. And Joan, you made a statement earlier too. I'm 76 years old. And I look around and I see 20, 25, 30-year-olds that aren't in near the shape that I'm in. And it's not because I'm any better. It's just that I've done simple things pretty consistently for long periods of time. I've never done a lot. It's not like I'm just a health nut and exercise nut. I go out there and just, exercise 5 hours a day and eat bark off trees. But what I try and do, I call it a simple system. I try and do simple things continuously. So anyway, what I want to do, I want to talk a little bit about where we are as a nation and why we're here. Some real practical aspects of why I think LiveGood is in the right place at the right time. Nutrition is the fuel of the human structure. And if you're a Bible believer, most of the laws, if you look at the laws in the Bible and the old Leviticus law, they're about health. They're nutrition laws, and they weren't laws to try and make life hard for people. They were laws to teach people how to be healthy, how to avoid being sick. And God had originally put together a natural process for man. We hear all this thing about, we've got to reduce our carbon footprint. We've got to reduce our carbon footprint. We've got to, save the environment. We're not going to save the environment. We're the problem with the environment. God had a natural process. He called it carbon sequestration. He had all these plants that would just naturally use photosynthesis to draw carbon dioxide out of the air, this carbon footprint we're talking about. And through that photosynthesis, plants would absorb carbon dioxide, all these greenhouse gases. And then there used to be, and listen to what I tell you, used to be, the biggest problem we have on the farmlands in America today is we no longer have soil. We have dirt. The soil has been deplenished. Years ago, there used to be all these living microbes in the soil that would draw that carbon from the plant and exchange nutrients. And that's where the plant would get back its nutritional quality. And then that excess carbon would be stored in the soil. It was called a carbon sink. And then that plant would give out this nice clean oxygen back to us for clean air for us to breathe and all these natural nutrients. So what we decided to do so we decided to cut all the trees down. And that's exactly what we've done in America. We've destroyed 90% of our old growth forest across the nation. Many of you, if you've ever been to the Smoky Mountains, it's an hour and a half from where I live. I used to, I haven't lately, used to backpack and hike in it a lot. Did you know back in the early part of the last centuries, they literally logged the Smoky Mountains to oblivion. They cut all the wood off the Smoky Mountains. The reason it became a protected national park because they took it over because the mountains were eroding away. And so they decided to make it a national park so they could reestablish all the vegetation Otherwise, we wouldn't call it Smoky Mountains. We'd call it the Smoky Hills more than likely. But and a lot of people don't know that. So anyway, what I try and do, I like to talk to people about why and how you need to feed your immune system. I've been doing this now since 1979 when I got into applied nutrition with my very first nutrition company. And I've done that ever since. And I like to talk to people about when and how to maximize your diet with supplementation. Listen, you don't have to take everything LiveGood sells. You have to take what you need. You have to learn and educate yourself to what products you need to incorporate in your diet to make your diet optimum nutritional healthy. That's the real secret. And you know, one of the things that I really like about LiveGood is the information they provide on our supplements. You know, I don't have to do the research to find out why our supplements aren't the same as others. They provide us the information for that. Every product, if you've been on our calls over the last several weeks, one of our calls last week, I talked, or week before last, I talked about the educational process of LiveGood. It isn't just about selling supplements, it's about educating people why they need this supplement and why this supplement's different. That's the real key. I mean, you can go buy magnesium in 1,000 different places, but why not get the very best magnesium at the most economical price? That's good business sense. And so what I see is not only the most optimal way to supplement your diet with LiveGood, but the most economical way to supplement your diet for optimum health. And you know, I talked 3 weeks ago, you know, if you could get everybody that you know, every person you know, to do one thing only, and that's take LiveGood's multivitamin, whether a man or a woman, take LiveGood's multivitamin every single day, one in the morning, one at night with food. If they don't eat dinner at night, take one in the morning with breakfast, one with lunch. Doesn't matter when you take it, but take it with food. And then use one of our protein supplements and do that every day. Do you realize, George, that would put you in the top 20% of optimum nutrition of all Americans? Now, why is that so important? Well, let's take a look. Why do we need to reach out? Why do we have to touch people? Well, here's why. 70%, and these are not my statistics, folks. I've gone to the National Institutes of Health PubMed, American Diabetic Association, American Dietetic. None of these statistics are mine. I've learned to reach out and get my data from places that if somebody wants to impeach the data, they got to go to people much more official than me. But 70% of Americans are on one or more prescription medications every single day. Right now, I think we've got, how many people we have on here, George or Wayne? Can you look?
12, 13.
13.
13 now. Yeah.
13. Folks, that means probably 7 of you at least. If the numbers work out, 7 of you on this call are on at least one prescription medication. Now, I'm not against prescription medications. I'm not against the healthcare system. My belief is the healthcare system is on the liability side of the wellness balance sheet. And I don't mean that the healthcare system is a liability. I mean, you in the healthcare system is a liability. Dwayne, why do you say that? Well, I went to PubMed and I typed in, you can do this, what are the top 4 leading causes of death in America? Number 1, heart disease. Now, here's what's interesting. Dr. Joan, you may even know this. When I got into the wellness industry back in 1974, do you know heart disease was non-existent in the female population? 1 out of every 100,000 women may have heart disease, but basically it wasn't a healthcare issue in the female population of America in 1974. Today, here's the benefit of all this exercise and diet and all the stuff that we think is making health better. Heart disease is now the #1 killer of women in America. Is that not amazing? Cancer's number 2. My whole family's died of cancer. So folks, that's a very important statistic to me. I've had cancer. I've beat it so far, 76 years old. But get this, folks, the third leading cause of death in America is medical malpractice. What? That's right, medical malpractice. And the fourth leading cause of death, and depending on which study you look at on PubMed, it's the third or fourth leading cause of death, is prescription drugs. It's not fentanyl. It's not mass shootings. It's not car wrecks. It's prescription drugs. And that's the reason that I say the healthcare system is on the liability side of the wellness, the balance sheet. Now, 24% of all Americans are on 2 or more prescription medications every single day. 12.8% are on what's called polypharmacy. That means it's very possible 10% of the 13 on this call, that would be a little less than 2 people, are taking 5 or more prescription medications every day. And normally, if you find someone that's taking 5 prescription medications, at least 2 of those are because of the other 3. That's right. They have to prescribe a prescription medication because they prescribed a prescription medication. This year, and we laugh, Wayne, and we do, because it sounds funny, but it really isn't. You know, this year, February of this year, all the news stories that we set a new record in America. 42.8% of Americans are now clinically obese. Now, folks, when I got into the industry back in 1974, that figure was between, depending on the study at the time, was somewhere between 12 to 18% of the adult population was clinically obese. Today, folks, that 42.8% is the entire population of all ages. That's right. We now have 10-year-olds that are having advanced cardiovascular issues. 10-year-olds. It's amazing. 48.1% of Americans have high blood pressure. And this is another growing healthcare. This is an industry, folks. When you hear about healthcare problems in America, they are industries. There are companies that build their businesses around this industry. And remember, you know, I have a young lady that I know. She's head of the Alzheimer's Foundation of Tennessee, here in Tennessee. I know her from some senior resource network groups that I go to. And we go to these senior resource network groups. These are groups who run all the senior healthcare and living facilities in the area. And the growth, what they're always talking about, the beds are full, we're adding new beds, is Alzheimer's, is cognitive disorders. It's an exploding industry. And Tracy will come in and you know, she'll talk about the Alzheimer's Foundation and how we're going to make Alzheimer's a memory. And I want to tell her, I say, Tracy, if you think these people are building all these facilities and adding all these beds for all these cognitive disorders so that something can come along and solve it and empty this out, it's not going to happen. Folks, Alzheimer's is here to stay. It is a growth industry, just like digestive disorders. This is the next big growth industry, and it's all tied to diet. Now, here's what happens. The American diet, when I got involved in applied nutrition back in 1979, we talked about processed foods, primarily related to grain products. And but today, and this is right from the American Dietetic Association, 90% of Americans, 92% are deficient in one or more vital nutrients every day. When I had my wellness practice back in the 90s after I sold my health clubs, and we had a program that we would do these 3 and 7 day food diaries, and all our clients, before we took them on, we had to have a blueprint of what their diet was. And they had to record everything they ate or drank for 7 days. We'd plug it into this program, and it would print out their nutritional levels and every single vital nutrient. Folks, I was blown away. Every single client that we had, without exception, was deficient below minimum daily. This was back when it was MDR, minimum daily requirements. and if you don't know how they came up with that, they basically would take healthy rats, they would take a particular nutrient, start removing it from that rat's diet, and reduce it down till they first started seeing symptoms, and that would be the start level. And then they'd reduce it down until they had a full-blown nutritional deficiency disease, and that's how they'd come up. So they basically use rats to tell us, what our levels were. But every single one of these clients was below one, or were below at least one, and many of them two or more minimum daily requirements every single day. And that's how we're living our life in America today. We are living at subpar nutrition. Our cells are deteriorating. It's on a micro level to start. It doesn't show up when you're 20 or 30. You start getting 40, and all of a sudden you're starting to feel tired. You're putting on a little weight. You're starting to have a few aches. It's starting to affect in what we call at a macro level. This is when we really start getting that cell deterioration. And then all of a sudden it surfaces in a disease level. And I'll show you that in just a minute. But we, across the board, Americans are deficient. And what that ends up happening by the time we hit 65, and folks, now that I'm 76 and I'm a director of one of these senior resource networks, so I'm getting to see the results of this amongst seniors. 80% of this is from Medicare, folks. So these are the people that deal with this. 80% of all Americans by the time they're 65 have at least one or more chronic diseases. That's blood pressure, high cholesterol, arthritis, ischemic coronary heart disease, diabetes, cognitive disorders, and almost all of it, you draw direct lines, is to diet. Now, there's other factors. There's environmental issues. Hydration plays a big part of this. But the fuel of the human structure, it's nutrition. So let's take a look at this. If we are what we eat, and here is where the real pedal hits the metal, folks. It's no longer processed food. It's now what we call ultra processed foods. Well, Dwayne, what do you mean by that? Well, we're talking about food that's artificial, man-made foods. We're talking about chemical created foods today. Did you know they just, George, they just created a DNA structure where they could now this sounds crazy, have soy plants grow pork or a version of it. And you're like, what? So one of the largest studies done to date was released February. You can look this up, folks. You would have thought it had been on the front page of every newspaper. Well, it wasn't. But it was the largest study done to date. It was the most complete study of the ultra. This was done in the United Kingdom, to pointing that this high consumption of ultra processed foods. Now you notice in print they'll say may be linked. Now you go read the study. It's pretty definitive that it's the diet link that's causing this, but it says may be linked to an increased risk of developing and dying from cancer, an Imperial-led study suggests. I've read through the study. It's pretty definitive. It's sort of like in the air purification business. Wayne and George will relate to this. We had an ozone producing product that the government didn't want you to know about, because when you put oxidative technology in people's homes for long term, somebody in that home would normally get a health benefit. It sounds crazy, but that's what would happen. So we couldn't make claims. Well, the first time I put it into a place where there was mold, the mold went away. I go, I wonder if this did it. So let me find another place with mold, and I put it in there and the mold would go away. Well, you put that product in 100 places that have mold, and every time you do, the mold goes away. I don't need a scientific study to tell me it got rid of mold. All I had to know was that every time I put it in a mold environment, the mold went away. So I could tell you pretty assuredly, I have mold, will this get rid of it? Well, I don't know. Why don't you put it in and try it and see if it does? And that's the same thing with nutrition. Now, the difference with nutrition is you don't change cellular destruction overnight. And that's what happens on these ultra processed diets. We start slowly destroying at the cellular level, the mitochondria level. In fact, you're going to find more and more doctors. To me, it's very supportive because these are things I've been talking about for 50 years. And I've been in contention with the medical field for 50 years over this. More and more doctors, honest people, even if they're doctors, will sometimes come out and tell the truth. So we're finding more and more doctors. In fact, tonight after this call, and maybe tomorrow before I send it out, I'm going to send out a email. Hopefully you'll watch it. To another doctor and her brother. She's left the medical field. She's written a book about just how corrupt the American food system is and how it's tied in with big chemical and big pharma. This Dr. Robert Lustig, go to Amazon, just Google Dr. Lustig. He's written some great books all about this merger of big pharma, big ag, big food, and big chemical. So it's all one big conglomerate. There's no longer a single food company. Big chemical is also big food. Big pharma is also big chemical. For years, I thought Bayer was aspirins. How many of you grew up thinking Bayer only made aspirins? Bayer is one of the largest chemical companies in Germany. They make all kinds of chemicals. Bayer aspirin is just one of them. And in fact, most people don't know this, but Bayer, I believe it was Bayer, was who developed heroin and first sold it as a pharmaceutical drug. That's where these things come from. But anyway, this is a great book. If you want to really get some substance about your diet and what's going on in the American food supply, Dr. Lustig's books are really good. And you can go to Amazon, look them up. So here's what's happened. We have started introducing a whole new ingredient into food. It really started after World War II. That's where you saw four industries really come to their own. You saw the chemical industry. Chemical industry helped us win the war. Nitrogen for bombs. You saw the food processing industry. How do you feed millions of young Americans overseas in war zones? We had to process food differently. You saw the pharmaceutical industry come out of it. They were treating things they'd never seen or dealt with before. And most people don't know it, but World War II is what made tobacco king. American tobacco figured out, what we'll do? Because, most Americans, World War II that went overseas didn't smoke. There was only a small percentage of American males that smoked previous to World War II. So what big tobacco did, they said anybody in a combat zone gets free American cigarettes. Benefit of that was, one, you could get people addicted that never smoked before, and it was a good trading. Even people that didn't smoke would take them because American tobacco was much better than a lot of the overseas tobacco, so they could use them to trade for different things. But what ended up happening was all these American males went overseas, came back addicted to tobacco, and the tobacco industry was born. And folks,
Can I say about that? Well, I never smoked and I hated it all my life, still do. But in basic training, when I was in basic training, 1972, every time we went out and they called it bivouac or something like that, and I called it playing army, going camping out in the woods. They, along with your food, what they call that?
Your rations.
Yeah, food, right? They gave everybody one or two little packages of cigarettes, and I read some more after you had told me about it, and it did. And I've already talked to 3 veterans over at the VA hospital that said that that's when they smoked their first cigarette, and then they were still addicted to it, 60, 70 years later. Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely. It's what built the industry, folks. And all the women went to work in the factories and they started smoking. Folks, listen, most people don't realize that when all the stuff started coming out about big tobacco, and big tobacco had to fess up, The American Medical Association their retirement program was 100% invested in tobacco stock. And here's what most people don't realize. When all of the news started breaking, and after the states won that lawsuit against Big Tobacco shifted, became one of the largest owners of food manufacturing in America. And they shifted all of that science about how to make tobacco addictive to how to make food addictive. And they started on to where we are today. And this is all history. You can look it up. It's stuff you can find if you know where to look. You know, this one little chemical, BHT, it's outlawed in most European countries. It's they say possible human carcinogen. It's added to flour of almost all packaged baked goods. It's banned in countries like Brazil, Canada, European Union, United Kingdom. And despite all of this, the FDA hasn't even reviewed it since 1973. Why? Because it creates millions and millions of dollars of profit for big chemical, and that pays for a lot of lobbyists to make a lot of laws. And that's the heart of it. Listen, when I got into the industry in 79, we talked about there were over 1,200 chemicals being added to our food. That was 1979. Look what's happened since then. Today, there's over 10,000 additives approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to preserve, to package, to modify the taste, the look, the texture, to make artificial food. In fact, if you haven't been there, I recommend go to ewg.org. It's one of my favorites that I save. You can go look at chemicals in your food, your water. You can type in your zip code. It'll pull up your municipal water supply. Find out what's in your water. But folks, chemicals that are linked to cancer, nervous system harm, immune system harm, all right in your pantry. You don't have to go out to your garage to your chemicals and your paint shelf. Just go to your pantry right there. It's in your food. It's in your food packaging. It's in the packaging of your food. You know, when these forever chemicals first surfaced, these PFAS they call them, they started realizing not only were they in food, they were in personal care products, they're in disinfect, they're in everything. Now they're in your water, now they're in your air, and they are even in your food packaging at fast food restaurants. And that science has discovered that they can migrate into the food that's in that package. So a lot of the fast food companies have started moving away from it, but most haven't. And if you go to ewg.org, once again, there's a place on there you can find out which fast food companies still are using wrappings with these forever chemicals in them. 3M, it's just settled. This was back in June of last year, a $10.3 billion lawsuit for these forever chemicals. Not to quit making them. No, they're still making them. This is just the cost of doing business, folks. That's it. The Sierra Club just did a study of 60%. You know, I think I live in this pristine area. We have all these nice rivers and lakes. 60% of them now contain forever chemicals. They say they're in just about every municipal water supply in America today. They're there today. They're only going to be worse tomorrow because they haven't quit making them. And there's the problem. And if it's in the food or in the water, it's in your food. Now, I've been in the weight loss and weight management industry now a lot of years. And you know, back 25 years ago, I started having clients that I knew were doing everything right. I knew they were dieting like they should. I knew they were exercising, but they weren't losing weight. And we never could figure it out. And then all of a sudden, science started discovering that we have these chemicals that are called obesogens. These are these chemicals that are lean. One of the benefits of lean, it helps offset some of the problems that these obesogens, they make you fat. How do they do it? They slow down your metabolism. They block these A1C, these receptors in the digestive system. They make you feel hungry more often. They cause you to crave unhealthy foods. You think this might be part of a systematic poisoning? It increases the size and production of fat cells. And the worst obesogens to avoid, guess what? Are the ones that are most in abundant supply. But here's what I want to point out to you from this. Look down here at the bottom. It says to rid your body of toxins, detoxification essential. Consider the natural mineral zeolite for daily detox due to its ability to bind to a variety of toxins, helping to safely and gently expedite them out of the body. Guess what we just introduced today, folks? I was so excited. I've been asking Dr. Goodkin about this, emailing him back. He says, it's coming, Dwayne, it's coming. We just introduced it today, our detox, chlorophyll and zeolite. Now, I haven't had a lot of chance to study it, so I can do talk to you more about it. But I've been, of course, looking and studying on zeolite for a long time now. So if you haven't been to, you go into your website, go to products, look it up, start studying about this. This will be an integral part of our weight management program with our lean, our organic mushroom weight loss coffee, and our detox product. And then when we combine this with some of our proteins and, for meal replacements, I think we can end up with one of the best weight management programs in the industry. I'm going to wrap up tonight. Go ahead. Somebody have something to add?
This George, I've used the zeolite for probably 2 or 3 years, and I'm here to tell you, you're going to hear some incredible testimonies.
And I bet you were paying a pretty price for it too, weren't you, George?
Oh yeah, yeah, 70, 80 bucks.
Exactly.
But I got the pure powder from the guy who first brought it to the US, and that one container would last a very long time, 3, 4, 5.
Fantastic. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about this. I'm going to end up tonight. I want to talk a little bit about label reading. And this is just one of the examples that I use, but I use Wheat Thins because this has been my favorite cracker for years. Wheat Thins was first introduced in 1948. I think it was the year I was born. Nabisco bought the recipe. I believe it was from a German miller. I think it was. But I want to show you some things. These are how Madison Avenue tricks you today. So let me do a little explanation about label reading for you. I want you to look at this. You notice how this is nice and bright. You walk down the food aisle and it catches your eye. And when you look up here, what you see is 100% whole grain Wheat Thins. Now, what that tells your brain is that this is made with 100% whole grain wheat. See how that's tied together? That's not what that says. Under labeling laws, if I put right here 100% whole grain wheat, by law, I have to have at least 10% whole grain. If I say 100%, it didn't, I'm not telling you this is whole grain wheat. Wheat Thins is the name of the product. So when this says 100% whole grain, it can be any grain as long as at least 10% of it is whole grain. Now, the problem even today is even what is whole grain anymore. Now, when I have the name of a nutritional substance, Wheat Thins, in the name of the product, then by law, let me wet my whistle there. By law, wheat has to make up 10% of that. That's the law. The rest of it could be something else. But since wheat's in the name, so this is telling you it's got at least 10% whole grain of some type, and not necessarily wheat. It is, but it's not necessarily have to be. And since the name is Wheat Thins, it has to have at least 10% wheat. That's the law. That's not what most people read this. Now, here's something else I want to point out to you. Original. I want you to remember that word. Remember, original Wheat Thins. The recipe was bought and started being manufactured by Nabisco, and I believe it was 1948. Do you think there was any bioengineered foods in 1948, Joe? I don't think so. So I go right over here and look at this. It radiates, no artificial flavors or colors. These are all eye catchers, okay? So we know it only has to have 10% of a whole grain. We know it only has to have 10% wheat since it's in the title. And it says it's no artificial flavors or colors. So let's look at this. Let's do a little investigation. So I come over here and I take a look and I see, well, it does have whole grain wheat flour. Look at what the second ingredient is, canola oil. Has anybody ever seen a canola plant? Sam, you ever seen a canola plant? Dr. Joan, you ever seen a canola plant? There's no such thing. Canola oil stands for Canadian oil. It's rancid rapeseed oil. It's one of the worst oils you can use, but it's also one of the cheapest. And that's why you're seeing in just about everything today. Remember that little cancer-causing ingredient, BHT, we talked about earlier? BHT. Now, you know, if they don't tell you what I told you about BHT, here's what they tell you about it. It's added to preserve freshness. Oh, that must be good. That's what the average person looking at this would think. Now, let's look a little bit further. If I can get my screen to change. Look right here. Remember this original ingredients derived from bioengineered sources. You know what? I don't think there was any bioengineered sources back in 1948. So it makes you wonder, what does this original mean? Well, it means the name. It's the original name. How do I know this? Well, if you look, there's an 800 number on here. Oh, let me go back. There's an 800 number on here you can call for their customer service. So I called them up. I said, well, I just have a few questions I'd like to ask you. Sure. I said, do you know if these canola plants, are they domestic canola plants, or do you think they're importing those? She said, well, I'm sure we're using as much domestic canola plants as we can, but we probably import some of it. I said, okay, thank you for that. I said, I have another question. This term bioengineered, what does that mean? Does that mean it's man-made? She goes, no, that means it's better. I said, oh, it means it's better, more nutritious. Yeah, more nutritious. I said, well, I'm curious that original, what does that mean? Well, it's the original name, wheat thins. So these are things that you have to learn. In fact, I'm going to do one on everybody. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to stop my share screen here, and right down at the bottom, you'll see where you can raise your hand. How many of you have ever heard of Nabisco vanilla wafers? Raise your hand if you know what Nabisco vanilla wafers are.
Yep.
Anybody else? Ever heard of, do you like Nabisco vanilla wafers? Well, guess what? There is no such thing as a Nabisco vanilla wafer. And I'm going to just leave you with that and let you think about it. And we'll do another label reading on Nabisco vanilla wafers. It's one I put together almost 30 years ago. But that was my favorite cookie growing up, Nabisco vanilla wafers. And when you find out what's happened to that product. All right, I'm going to stop my recording here.